And thank you everybody for coming to this monthly roundtable. It's 8th organized by EURALO, and we have the pleasure to have some French-speaking people today, but some of them will talk in English. But I wanted first to also thank you, Pari, who agreed to moderate and organize this session. It's great, and thank you. Last thing I want to say, it's that two things. The first one, it's the last monthly roundtable from this year, as next month we will have our General Assembly in exactly 1 month, the 14th of December. Therefore, we will have not monthly roundtable. And I don't know what we will do next year. We will see if we change something or if we continue on the same path. And the last word, it's about, we will try today to have one of the speakers on the French room, therefore in a non-English room, and we will see how it's worked, because usually all the speakers are on the English room, and whatever their mother tongue, they speak in English. If it's too painful, we will ask Lucien to come to the English room. If it's working not too badly, and please tell us in the chat if it's too difficult for you. If it's working well, we will keep doing that for this session, and we will see for the future how it works. Once again, thank you, Pari, for your help in organizing this session, and I give you the floor, and not just the floor, I give you the key of the room for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sébastien. And hello, everyone, and welcome to EURALO's Roundtable 8. I am delighted to moderate it. Encryption challenges in the French and European regulatory space is a timely discussion. To have a safe, secure, and functioning society, we need a safe and trustworthy internet, and encryption is critical in achieving that. However, there is an argument for a need to have a special access by law enforcement agencies. But technical community points out that encryption is a system. If part of the system is weakened, so is the system as a whole. And any access mechanism will make the system vulnerable to exploitation by both law enforcement and bad actors. The key challenge is to find a balance that safeguards safety, security, and privacy. This topic is particularly important to ICANN as one of the founding institutions of Internet global architecture. This topic is also very close to my heart and my work in shaping the conversation at the intersection of technology and geopolitics. So again, thank you, Sébastien, for putting this topic forward and asking me to moderate the discussion. Today, we are fortunate to have two distinguished speakers to help us to navigate this complex topic. Sébastien was kind enough to provide introductory slides for a speaker, which you can see on the screen. So I will give a very brief introduction for each speaker to save time. Our first speaker, Lucien Castex. I'm sorry. Our first speaker, Lucien Castex, is the public policy representative for Afnic, the association tasked with managing the domain name registry in France. As you can see on the screen, he's a highly accomplished professional with a very interesting background. He's joining us from Paris to discuss the legal framework for encryption in France, discussing the political and social challenges. Our second speaker, Jean-Christophe, Toquin, and I apologize if I didn't pronounce your name properly. I get that all the time with my own name. He's a distinguished professional acting as the Encryption Europe coordinator, among many other roles that he plays, as you can see on the screen, which makes him a perfect candidate for our discussion today. He's joining us from Belgium to present a debate from the European perspective, discussing the challenges for law enforcement and policy makers. Again, it's a pleasure to welcome you all here. We will try to shed light on the challenges and opportunities ahead in making internet safe in Europe and beyond. We are going to proceed with presentation. After that, we will have 30 minutes Q&A session. I encourage you to listen to the presentation. Either raise your hand or post your question in the chat, and our wonderful support staff will help me to read them in proper order during the Q&A session. After that, speakers will have a chance to make their closing remarks. Now, without further ado, I'm really excited to welcome you here and turn the floor to our first speaker, Lucien. The floor is yours, and I would appreciate if you can keep it to 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is Lucien speaking. Thank you, Pari, for giving me the floor. My name is Lucien Castex, and I will try to present the subject matter in French to see to what extent we can truly engage the community in all languages. We have a richness and a great plurality of languages in our community. That is why I have decided to deliver my presentation in English, in French, and then I will be exchanging with you in English for the Q&A. So next slide, please. So the first question before us, and my presentation will be divided in two parts. So the first part will deal with the fact that encryption is an ongoing debate in Europe and in France. So we'll try to present the stakes first, and then the French legal framework. I will go over the history of the legal framework to allow you all to understand where we come from in terms of encryption, and then what the state of play is in France. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, when we speak of encryption, we speak of a language, of a mystery even. And we wonder about the capability of breaking the code. And when we speak of a code, we speak of others' will to interpret the message and to break the code. We usually draw a parallel with the stealing of bikes. Do we not constantly struggle with delaying the access to the message rather than preventing it? With the internet and the democratization of digital tools, we see a change of scale. On the one hand, we have a growing fear of surveillance, of the continuous analysis of our data, and then on the other hand, the social acceptability of new and emerging technologies. We recently saw this in France with the health crisis, for instance, with the Stop COVID application. I'm saying then a change of scale. And I mean by that the fact that technology is ever more used. It is essential technology. With the health crisis, technology became essential to be able to continue to communicate and to work, to teach. And we saw new digital weaknesses and a growing challenge in terms of cybersecurity and of protecting privacy. Next slide, please. In other words, we witnessed a growing awareness of the importance of security online, but also on the user's will to protect their privacy and their liberties, the freedom of expression, freedom of speech, of the freedom to protect their data, freedom of assembly, but for the effective implementation of other fundamental rights and freedoms as well. So encryption is a key tool to protect and promote fundamental rights. And yet, it is sometimes seen as an obstacle. For instance, in the context of criminal investigations or in the fight against terror. Next slide, please. So I would like to suggest we see what the history of our French legal framework is. On the right of the slide you now have up on the screen, you will see that there is a decree law dating back to 1939, which categorizes what back then was called cryptographic machines. And they are categorized, I would say, as weapons of war. So we go way back, as you see, and encryption was mainly used by the military and by diplomats. It was subject to drastic controls, and there was a general distrust from the public power vis-a-vis encryption.
So someone who's doing encryption seems to have something to hide. You can remember in 1939 those debates, and now we have a new debate. What, do we want confidentiality? Do we have something to hide because we want to have privacy? That is the question. In order to keep it simple, this is a system of authorization. You have to ask for an authorization in order to use encryption, in order to market systems and encryption systems. Regarding the law, you have a limitation of the keys, the encryption keys. Their length is limited to 40 bits, then 128 bits. And we also see some very cumbersome procedure. For instance, the request that has to be made to sequester the keys. There is a sequestration issue for the keys. But is a criminal going to sequester the keys that are enabling to commit some crimes? Of course not. Next slide, please. So we have a context of concurrence at the technical level and at the economic level, lots of competition. Since in some countries, encryption is very regulated, and in other countries, it's a very different legal regime, much more liberal. In France, it's quite rare to have authorization, private authorization being given for encryption. But fortunately, it is more and more accepted. You can see it with the law. dated July 10, 1991, regarding the principle of the secrecy of correspondence and the use of telecommunications to communicate. And we have a certain number of laws in 96, in 2001 and 2004. So we do observe at the same time, about 2000, there is a strong globalization of the economy. The internet arrives in the mainstream, and there is a need to protect exchanges using the internet. This is a new chapter of crypto wars. That's what we talked about at that time. So the debate is quite clear. Is encryption worth it? You have more pros than cons. Next slide, please. So, what is the situation today? In 2004, we have a law for the confidence in the digital economy that enables the use of encryption, not totally though. It's more free, you can use encryption. You have Article 30 of the law that talks about the principle of easy use of encryption. Nonetheless, we have a system of authorization of declaration when you have to import or export cryptography and cryptology equipment and services. On the other hand, the French cybersecurity agency, which is not the first one, is in charge of evaluating the requests and the authorization request and to control those declarations regarding supplying equipment. Next slide, please. So we're trying to find a balance between public order and privacy of exchanges. In France, we have, on one hand, an agency of cybersecurity called ANSSI, which is in charge of the prevention, defense, and awareness raising. We have a central office, as you can see on the screen, this French Central Cybercrime Prevention Office, fighting cyber criminality. Next slide, please. What is quite interesting in France is that there's still some mistrust regarding encryption. We can use encryption. It is authorized. Nonetheless, and to sum up, the use of encryption when there is a crime committed at the criminal level, it is an aggravating circumstance. That's how it is seen in the penal and criminal code. We have a procedure where you can see the Article 231 of the Code of Penal Procedure. It's a lifting of confidentiality, and the law enables the judges to lift the confidentiality and to, that's the way we call it, the means of the state regarding national defense secret. In that case, we have the right to de-encrypt a message and do decryption. There is an obligation to comply with Article L871-1 of the Code of Homeland Security, and those are for the providers of tools, of cryptological tools and methods, to refuse to give to the authorities and the legal authorities the decryption keys can be sanctioned by the Criminal Code 434-15-2. If you are being asked to decrypt and don't do it, you do risk a criminal condemnation. Consequently, we can do encryption, but there is a lot of mistrust regarding it, and you have to look at the balance and the proportionality of the encryption. We can use encryption to protect our rights. However, it is sometimes seen and perceived as preventing the law to do its work. Next slide. So the consequences of that, the question was asked in front of a Supreme Court in France at the constitutional level, Constitutional Council. And in front of magistrates and judges. So for now, regarding the mobile phone, those codes to open a mobile phone are considered as encryption keys. We have more decisions coming up, and we hope that the interpretation will be better coming up. To conclude, because I see that time is running up, when we talk about backdoors, we are in front of another security breach. We have to find this balance. A balance with the question that is, the abuses of the few, should they prevent the entire community to use those means? We have to search for that balance in that answer. Because encryption is central to build trust and to protect the confidentiality of those communications and electronic communications, and to protect the privacy of the users, legal and moral people. Thank you very much for your attention. We'll go to the last slide. Thank you. And I would like to thank our interpreters as well. It was a pleasure. We'll be able to go back to the questions soon.
Pari speaking. I believe Lucien is finished with his presentation. So thank you very much, Lucien, for sharing your thoughts with us. It was a highly enlightening presentation and a thought-provoking one. Presenting the historical dimension remind us that the dilemmas of encryption are not new, and there are lessons to learn from the history as we move forward. Also, this presentation gave us a deep window on what is happening and where are key challenges. Lucien presented the France perspective. I would like now to use that case as a springboard for the unfolding discussion to expand into Europe, discussing both law enforcement and policy makers' perspective in EU. And our second speaker, Jean-Christophe, has the background and is a perfect candidate to do that. Again, I encourage everyone to post questions in the chat room, and they will be answered in the Q&A session. Jean-Christophe, floor is yours.
Thank you, Pari. I will share my screen. Yes, I have the power. Thank you. Okay, let me just then kick off the time so that I stick on time. So thank you, everyone. It's really a great pleasure to be in this audience and talk about the challenges of encryption, the benefit and the challenges. So in Europe. So let me, okay, so I will say a few words about our alliance, Encryption Europe, and then three main ideas for this presentation will be how much 2021 is, in our opinion, a milestone in the making, because we may not understand how much this year is a turning point. I will explain. Then the second main idea that I will elaborate on is the need to keep a broad perspective when we talk about encryption and how to protect the right to use encryption. The answer is not in focusing just on encryption. It's very important to understand the broader perspective. And then the final idea that I want really you to remember is that we believe, at least, and this could be part of a discussion, that the European Union is the place or the part of the globe which may really help the rest of the globe to reach this balance between privacy and security. And I will explain why or how as well. A few words about our alliance. We have been established in 2019. We are an alliance of 10 SMEs. We really rely on the expertise of our companies. They are small, which means that we can talk to the CEO. Most of them are co-founders, and they have this double culture of business and technology, which is really essential to be credible when they talk to the ecosystem, to the policymakers. We are based in Luxembourg. I mean, I'm a French national myself, but we are based in Luxembourg, and this is not a coincidence. We are hosted by a public agency called Security Made in Luxembourg. And on this, among the participants today, you have Steve Clément. And Steve Clément is technical expert, very senior in security made in law, and I'm very happy he could join us today. So if I make stupid statements on the technology, or if you have questions on the technology, Steve Clément is really the go-to person. Last but not least, we are members since day one of the Global Encryption Coalition, which has been co-funded by ISOC, and ISOC is present today. And I could not insist enough on the quality and importance of this alliance, launched a year ago, basically, and which really will really help the encryption community to have an existence in front of policymakers. So we have been, the first, or one of the two first European Industry Alliance member of this initiative, and we are very proud of being a valued member of this group. So, security versus privacy. Are we in a time of confusion? Yes. You have, everyone pushing for or against encryption, using very complex legal arguments in favor or against encryption, for the right to investigate, for the right to protect, and it's not very clear the direction which will be taken. Australia, for instance, have decided to go against encryption, and they are a democratic country. So this can happen to all the other democratic countries, and this is a matter of big concern. Are we at a time of a milestone? Yes, we believe so. We are seeing a sea change in terms of regulation, in terms of understanding of the severity of cybercrime, and this is happening today. The maturity of the stakeholders has really evolved a lot for the better in the past few years. A lot of regulation is in preparation, and I will go back to this later in a few moments. And yes, EU, from our perspective, is a chance. So, if you want to protect encryption, or if you want to combat encryption, it's very important to understand the broader perspective. Lucien has been very clear on the situation in France. The origin of France, regarding encryption, treating encryption as a military arm, is a military weapon, is still present today in France. And while, yes, there is a much better framework to protect the confidentiality of communication, still France being France, security member of the security of the Council of Security of the UN, being the first military power in the EU, this is not neutral to the debate, and this is why we are hosted in Luxembourg, probably because this country has commitments to the liberal use of encryption. So, 3 dimensions to take in account: privacy, trust and safety, and encryption. Regarding privacy, yes, all of you should know about the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, enacted in 2016, which has really set a new standard for protection of privacy, not only in the EU, but has been used, by the US, like in California, or in China. Apparently, the new regulation is really being inspired to some extent by GDPR. Less known is the derogation to the e-privacy regulation, and there had been a heated debate on whether platforms like Facebook, like Microsoft or Google, but Facebook was, or Twitter, but Facebook was probably the most prominent company, could or should use or stop using technologies to analyze, detect, and remove illegal content on their platforms. And it was decided by Facebook that because of the lack of clarity in Europe, they would stop using these technologies, while Microsoft and others, Twitter and others, decided to continue to use these technologies, which had an impact on the privacy of the users. More recently, this summer, Apple proposed that they would enable kind of protection, or call it surveillance, of the devices of their users to protect, or prevent their phones to be used to disseminate child abuse images, sexual abuse of children. The last development is apparently that Apple has decided to not pursue with this feature, and that they would just enable some AI, artificial intelligence service on the device, so that the children using phones could be protected from illegal images or from sending such images, but without anyone to know outside of the children involved. The reason I tell about this is because there is a heated debate at the moment on requesting Facebook to not encrypt their service, because if they do so, then this would put their service into a black hole, and the community would lose access to millions of information related to users sharing this type of horrific image and videos. So, so if you talk about encryption, you talk about actually how companies can monitor their service from abuse by people interested in illegal images. The second dimension I want you to talk about that you should have in mind is the trust and what we call trust and safety. I don't know how many of you know about this word. It's come from the US. This word includes this terminology, talks about all the processes used by platforms in particular, like Facebook, Twitter, and so on, to protect the service from abuse and to also protect the community from, I mean, disinformation, hate speech, child abuse material, what have you. And so what's coming is in the EU, you have a pending legislation which is called the Digital Services Act. In the UK, you have the Online Harms Bill, which is being under discussion. Again, in the EU, you have decisions to build a new European Child Sexual Abuse Center to protect children and all the issues related with children. And this will be a sea change in terms of the way companies are regulated and how they protect their clients. Again, if you do implement strict encryption everywhere, and if you give the key of the encryptions to the clients, to the end users, then a lot of content will go dark and it will not be possible to detect and remove and report illegal content. And what this sea change will bring is that in the future, there will be much more reporting obligations on platforms. They will have to go through a much stricter compliance regime, and they will have to be much more transparent than they are today on what they do, the algorithms they use, and all the processes that they use to protect the service. Now, the third dimension, the one that we should be only talking about if we were just focused on technology, is encryption. And there are two documents that I invite you to look for on the web, and they are easy to find, they are public. The first one was published by the so-called Five Eyes countries, US, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and the UK, plus India, plus Japan, called International Statement, End-to-End Encryption and Public Safety. And what you find here is a call to, undermine encryption, to put it simple, to enable governments to fight against terrorism and child sexual abuse. And I am, in other part of my life, involved in the fight against child sexual abuse. I'm chairing the global network of hotlines dealing with this type of content. And the way this is done actually, as a European, makes me a little bit uncomfortable in the way the two topics are mixed or associated. Then a month later, the EU, the Council of the EU, which is the highest executive body of the EU, published a very interesting resolution called Security Through Encryption and Security Despite Encryption. And this document was trying to define the balance between safety and security. And while it is not very clear how they are going to do this, at least from a political standpoint. This document, in our opinion, as Encryption Europe, this document is much clearer on the need to find balance and the need to respect encryption. And this for us is really something we find very important. Okay, talking about confusion, there was a very confusing draft legislation in one member state of the EU, which is from Belgium. Belgium has been the most proactive country in enabling encryption for decades. And the reason why they have today a strong encryption expertise is because they have had a liberal use of encryption for decades. And this country, at the heart of the EU institutions, I mean, given they are, close geographically to the EU institutions, have published a draft law which is basically asking telecommunication operators to decrypt information on demand. And the way to do it is by undermining encryption. And so the Global Encryption Coalition made a very effective campaign to remind the Belgian parliament that what they were aiming to do was basically weakening encryption. And apparently the piece of legislation will be adjusted. But this shows that no country is protected from very bad legislation. Now, people may say, what do we do to protect against criminals? If everything goes dark, meaning if everything gets encrypted, how are we going to protect the honest people against terrorists or the abusers against children? And there was a major takedown this year initiated by the French gendarmerie, the French law enforcement, the Dutch and police and Europol. And I would like on this call, I'm allowed to tell you that we have an important member of Europol on this call named Philippe Aman, who is the head of strategy of Europol. And the encrypted case is a takedown of an encrypted communication service, mobile phones, encrypted mobile phones, who were primarily used by hardcore criminals. And so the police did not ask EncroChat to decrypt the service because they were not willing to do so. What they did is that they used a vulnerability to get into the system silently. And then for 2 years, I believe, they collected communications outside of the knowledge of EncroChat. And they could, really take down one of the hardest drug gangs, and they could rescue the life of 200 people, if I understand the latest statistics. And for us, Encryption Europe, this is a great example of how to protect our community and our countries and our people from the worst of the worst criminals without touching or weakening encryption. And so for us, this type of approach should be promoted, probably better organized. This is not something, that is done, should be done lightly, but this is a direction that should be taken. So in the 1 or 2 minutes I have left, I would like to insist on this conclusion, which is, when you see, we put aside the bad example of Belgium with the current legislation, but if you look at the GDPR and how the discussion has really helped shape the global debate, when you see how the upcoming regulations of the Digital Services Act is going to create a sea change in terms of how companies, platforms protect the service. And when you look at the innovation brought by law enforcement to decrypt or access encrypted communication without weakening encryption, this is something very interesting. And I would not necessarily be super comfortable to push for law enforcement to do more of the encrypted case in other parts of the world, because I don't know the legal framework in other parts of the world. I can say in Europe that police is operating under strict scrutiny. They have a lot of compliance rules to respect. And this is an example that's, I mean, protect us and should be more promoted. With this, this is what we believe. This is the end of my presentation, and I would now be available for the Q&A.
Pari speaking. Jean-Christophe, thank you very much for a truly stimulating presentation and for highlighting the threats that come our way and the complexity of the issues that policymakers encounter. I believe we had two inspiring presentations. Now I would like to move to Q&A session. So I don't see any hands are raised. Let me go to chat. Okay, I see a question from Dr. Gopal. It reads, encryption has always been a trade-off between user privacy and national security. What are the provisions based on French national security on encryption? This question was posed by Dr. Gopal from India. So anybody would like to take that question?
Lucien, what's the, you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. Was connecting the audio of the English channels. So on the French, for the French provisions, you have quite a lot. You have first the lifting of confidentiality in the Code de procédure pénale, which is quite an important provision because you're obligated to comply under a penalty of not doing so. As I was saying earlier, also encryption is seen as an aggravating circumstance in committing any crime in France. And you have an article within the Code de la Sécurité Intérieure, which is an obligation to cooperate for companies offering encryption services. So it's quite tight, if I may say it that way. You have a freedom to use encryption, but still the need to have an authorization process and in a declarative process if you supply, import, or export cryptography equipment and services. I could develop about a few cases in French, but it might take us a bit far. So maybe go back to the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Lucien. And I wonder if speakers have questions or comments that they want to put forward.
I've seen a question from Greg Mounier, which I would like to take, but maybe there are other questions before. I mean, just to answer on the gentleman from India on yes?
Please continue. I'm sorry.
Okay, so no, I think national security versus.
But read the question, please, before, because people who are not on the room can't read the question. For Paris, okay. It's better if you can read it. Sorry for interrupting you.
Jean-Christophe, could you please read the question?
So I would just repeat the question from Godalta de Pali. Encryption has always been a trade-off between user privacy and national security. I think by national security, you may talk about intelligence agencies, which is different from the military, different from judicial police. And I think the national security, as you understand it, I suppose, is a difficult one because it's there and it brings its own contributions to the public security, but it's not something you can discuss openly. It's not regulated the way police is regulated or even the military. So, so before we regulate national security or we talk about this, there are more low-hanging fruits that's like working with the police, which we believe is maybe a better first step. I would like to take the question from Greg Mounier. I will read it because it's very interesting. First question is, are you in favor of lawful hacking? And then he made some more comments. Should we regulate the practice of lawful hacking and the process of finding vulnerabilities and developing exploits? So what we talk about here is the capacity for law enforcement to use offensive methods to basically penetrate, the suspect system, the system of a suspect, and investigate. And so we have been thinking about this at Encryption Europe, and the answer in a nutshell is yes. Yes, we are in favor of lawful hacking, meaning this must be something heavily regulated and with strong public scrutiny, which does not really exist today. So, if you look at the ways lawful hacking is done by public entities, governments, it's not very transparent. And this is not really ideal for the privacy of citizens around the world. And this is why if we could bring a legal framework of lawful hacking, this would be actually really a progress for global safety, pending this is really well organized, properly funded, and also that when the law enforcement do find vulnerabilities, they do not keep it for themselves forever. Because the problem is when intelligence agencies do find or buy vulnerabilities on the market, they keep it forever. And this is not good for the global security of the internet. So yes, Greg, very much in favor. Very difficult topic, but you can count on us to push in this direction, pending there is proper oversight and scrutiny.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Sivas Paramanian, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it properly. So he writes, rather than attempt to maintain positions as close to the extreme of encryption and no encryption as a technology decision, why don't we try and find a balance by entrusting encryption to trusted providers, trusted by users, with the providers instituting a responsive system to unveil encryption in situation of extreme harm and in real emergencies, but maintain truthful to the need to encryption. Who would like to take this question?
I can, but Lucien,
yeah, please do. Please do.
Go ahead, Jean-Christophe.
Well, this is something we have been working on ourselves within the Alliance. So one thing we considered, for instance, would be that we would you could give access to content. You could decrypt content based on quorum. So basically, you would say, okay, if let's say the police plus the judge plus the privacy authority would allow decryption, then we would be in a kind of a secure system. Our position at the moment is yes, well, technically this could work. This could not be a weakening of encryption per se, but the problem is that the public institutions are not robust enough, and the oversight is not robust enough anywhere in the world so that we could enable this kind of solution without a risk. So then it's more kind of legal issue than a technical one. And then what is a trusted person? I mean, honestly, today you trust someone and tomorrow this person is, I mean, losing their mind, or they are being bought for money. No one can be really trusted forever and all the time and everywhere. So this is why trusting, defining who is trusted is almost an impossible task.
Thank you very much, Jean-Christophe. I see a hand was raised. I am not able to give the floor to that. Could support staff help me by giving the floor?
Yes, I believe it was Sébastien. If you still have your question, you may go ahead.
Okay, maybe he lowered his hand. In this case, I can pose a question. If he raised his hand, then we can give the floor to him. Okay, so one question I have is, to what extent this impact competition and small and medium-sized enterprises, especially businesses that are international? Who is bearing the cost and how it's impacting their competitiveness? Anyone wants to take that question?
Sure. Just to bump in on what Jean-Christophe said, quite agree, indeed. And I think on that topic, as I was saying in the chat, the key is to have quite a strict scrutiny, so that we can actually know what we are doing. About small businesses, SMEs, and indeed a global in a global competition market, we often talk about having encryption to protect civil liberties, digital rights for the internet user. But SMEs are also at risk when obviously connecting to the internet using data, digital technologies. And so having a way to secure electronic communication and to protect IP, to protect their properties is quite an important point also for developing a business abroad. And in that context, you have a number of, I guess, of scandals of companies being hacked in and having the data exposed. And so obviously there are patents, can you still hear me? I am
yes.
Having some echo. I'm not too sure. Thank you. So it's quite a difficulty also for companies and SMEs, and it's a matter of trust in digital technologies in the time of pandemic of COVID, with more businesses, small businesses going online. Very small one. You can't really not stress enough the need to secure communication and businesses online.
Thank you very much, Lucien. Another question I have is, in US, the Fifth Amendment offers individuals right to not testify against themselves. It has implications. It presents a challenge for law enforcement within encryption context. So they cannot force individuals to provide the password or codes. So is there an equivalent in Europe, and how is it dealt with? Anyone wants to take it?
I guess our people from Philippe Amann or Greg Monnier may have a better opinion, but yes, basically that's the same situation in Europe. I would not be able to give you the reference, but yes, that's the thing. And this is why it's important, back to the question of lawful hacking, to enable law enforcement to use techniques, innovative techniques to circumvent encryption. Of course, then it's a matter of how safe your encryption service is. If you use a crap solution or crap device, then entering into it despite encryption will be possible. If you use top of the top technology, then of course would be more difficult for the police. But it's the always old issue, the race between robbers and police officers. I mean, this is nothing new there. I mean, the people who are smarter and use better technologies have a little bit in advance ahead of the police officers.
Thank you very much, Lucien. I don't see any questions in the chat room. So one final question I have is, there is a lot of debate about decryption in order to help law enforcement. But isn't it time we also shift the conversation to see where the problem starts, rather than trying to undermine our security, privacy, to catch bad guys? Maybe isn't it also time for us to shift to see why these bad acts happen in first place, and how much conversation is around that area? Any comments from the speakers?
I mean, certainly, I mean, what you're right is it's very important to, so maybe what I will say is a bit philosophical, but I mean, we are in a society which has been working in silos. We are educated in law or in technology or in policy, what have you. And if you look at the organizations, the companies, the institutions, everyone work in silos, and then we don't get the bigger picture. And to build your point, if we keep on focusing on one problem, a certain type of criminals, but we don't look at the source of this problem, or we don't think more broadly, then we are not going to find a solution. So what you advocate for, I mean, I fully support, is for every problem, try to adopt a broader view. And if you're stuck in, I cannot decrypt this criminal gang, then then either you penetrate it through some offensive method, as with EncroChat, or you look at the type of crime you're talking about, and then maybe you legalize drugs to some extent, to give an extreme example. But then when you are stuck with a problem, there are many ways, and the broader mind you have, and the more people think and work in a cross-disciplinary fashion, then the more likely they're going to find solution, which otherwise would just be, people would just be stuck with encryption or a technical problem. So fully supportive of your invitation to think broadly.
Thank you very much. I see Steve Clement has raised hand. Could you please pick up your...
Yeah, hi, sorry, I will. So Steve Clement from Luxembourg. It's regarding to the previous question on what can law enforcement do to force you out of a password. I had the unfortunate event 5 years ago. I was indicted because I was doing my job. I was doing an incident response where a password leaked. unfortunately, I ended up being accused of stealing the password, but someone just gave me the password in my function as an incident operator. And then the police asked me for my passwords, and I said, I will not give you my passwords because A, I am not obliged under Luxembourgish law to give my passwords, and B, it's a private matter. And then they said, okay, that is okay, but you need to understand that this works to your charges. So this, you are now charging yourself. It's basically you are refusing to give valuable information. And then we need to see whether this is okay or not. And then I went for my deposition, and then they reminded me that they have the phone book treatment if push comes to shove, which was, I laughed it off, but I knew exactly what he meant. Like, if we want to get the information, we might get the information with a phone book. It's just an anecdotal thing, but it's real. This happened to me in Luxembourg like 5-6 years ago. So just to tell you, other people might have cracked and said, okay, here are all my passwords, just as a reference.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your experience and your thoughts. That's pretty interesting. So I don't see any questions. I'd like to see if our speakers have any. Oh, actually, we have a raised hand. Could you please give the floor to Siva Baramanian?
Thank you. First, before I talk about a clarification to a previous question, I want to respond to what the speaker just said. He was talking about his experience, and this reminds me that law and order agencies are not uniform throughout the world, and the standards and methods of law and order agencies vary from country to country. And if you think of the European environment and the kind of discipline and training Europe and enact a law that empowers law and order agencies to access encryption, make legislation anti-encryption, then in some countries it gets into a situation where any normal person is asked to hand over his phone and asked for his password, or he's completely helpless and he's without legal protection. So you create a basic legal environment which is excessively used in certain places. So you need to consider all those factors. And I also want to add a clarification to what the question that I raised, and one of the answers was that there are no trusted parties, to the effect that it's very difficult to find a trusted entity. And the idea expressed is that a trusted entity or a group of entities which comprises of a balanced group of persons can be entrusted the keys and an algorithm, and they'll not summarily weaken encryption by opening a back door or something, but in specific instances and specific situations that are warranted, morally warranted, they would decrypt that specific data segment of the dangerous communication from that suspected malignant person to avoid the danger and still preserve the encryption environment. That's what I said. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any comment from the speakers? No? Okay, I think at this stage, I would like to close the Q&A session and move on to our closing remarks. We had two truly inspiring speakers, and our participants posed intriguing questions. Now I would like to hear each speaker's reaction and closing remark. You each have few minutes, 2-3 minutes, starting with Jean-Christophe. Floor is yours.
Well, will be brief. I mean, I think I very much enjoyed the discussions in the chat coming from our colleagues from India and from Europol in particular. So I think it really shows the balance and the need to bring people together. Obviously, in this very crowd, you have people from different disciplines, different parts of the world, and we could discuss very specific way forward, like lawful hacking in, I would say, peaceful debates. So very pleased to have been invited to this community. And again, I think, yes, my final message is really we are in a time of a milestone, 2021, and we will see a major change in 5 years from now in terms of regulation and how we address this balance of safety and encryption, privacy and encryption. So very pleased to have been with you today. Thank you for listening patiently to our talks.
Thank you very much, Jean-Christophe. We are delighted to have you, and your presentation and talks were inspiring. Now, Lucien, floor is yours for your closing remarks.
Thank you, Pari. Same here. I'll be brief. Thanks to everyone and to the interpreter also, which are quite important to make this an event that everyone can follow. And also, as Jean-Christophe, I was quite interested in the debate in the chat, which was quite lively. Yeah, it was quite lively, which is great. Just a point. I agree on the balance. We need to test the balance and to ask ourselves. There is no evidence really that weakening encryption will stop criminals from finding other ways to communicate secretly. You know, so it's a matter of balance really, and the context is quite interesting because with the number of regulation at the European level and worldwide, it's a momentum, and I think I'll leave it there. Thank you everyone.
Thank you very much for truly stimulating comments. As we heard from our speakers, Europe is at the forefront of legislative approach for making internet and our societies safe. Yet, the encryption debate has become a debate of values. On one hand, there is the core value of individual security and privacy from each other and from the state. On the other hand, there is also the core value of national security. That security of the state is necessary to ensure the security of the individuals. Add to this complexity the cultural differences between national states and legislative differences, as well as borderless nature of internet. Within this extremely complex landscape, often debate is presented in a binary way and often behind closed doors. In my closing remarks, I would like to emphasize that the only way forward is through open, transparent, inclusive, and continuous public debate. And on this note, I would like to thank our speakers, all the participants, and our support team, including Gisela, Natalia, Michelle, and others who are behind the scene helping me. And thank you very much, Sébastien, for making it all possible. I would like also to note that a recorded version of today's roundtable will be available online. I now would like to hand the floor over to Sébastien to project into the next step. Sébastien, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pari, and really thank you for the speakers and for the participant. It was a very interesting debate, and we try in this monthly roundtable we try to find topics who can open your mind and then test or discuss new topic who are maybe not completely related to only ICANN or even not to ICANN, but it seems to us that it's important that we open new doors and new possibility of discussion. And I am very happy that it's organized by EURALO, yes, definitely, but it's not only EURALO people who came and who participate to that. We have people from as far as New Zealand, South America, Africa, and other part of the world. Therefore, it seems that it's important what is happening in Europe here. I hope that it will be useful for the rest of the world also. And to open the door for the next phase, we don't have any plan for next year yet. I am very sorry that we will not be able to go to a face-to-face meeting in March next year in Puerto Rico. I still hope that meeting in June will be available for people to participate in person in The Hague. We hope that Europe will be able to host the ICANN meeting. Not sure about that. And the first next step is IGF in Katowice. I hope it will be this hybrid meeting schedule. I have a fear that as Europe is going back to some bad news about the crisis, health crisis, I don't know it will be happen, but I hope. And then we have for EURALO and for the member of EURALO, and sorry for this internal matters, next month, the 14th of December, at the same time, I guess, we have the General Assembly, and that's once a year. Therefore, it's important that our member get mobilized to participate to this meeting. It's a pleasure to have you. I hope that you enjoy all the eight monthly roundtable. This one was great. Once again, Pari, thank you for moderating it and organizing it. It was great. For all staff, thank you very much. Interpreters, it was nice to try this time to have one of speaker in the French channel and not here in this Zoom and English room. I hope that one day we will be able to have the same facilities and during the ICANN meeting. I am still struggling for that because I think it will allow easier participation from the people. And with that, I would like to really thank all of you for your participation. And if we don't see you before, have a good end of the year. And if you celebrated, a Merry Christmas. Once again, thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you, Sébastien, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining today's EURALO's Roundtable. Please take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Recording stop.